All right, guys, it's been a minute. This video is probably gonna get 10 views, but all right. In part one, we spoke about Malcolm X and Martin being important to the 1968, and that's where history usually stops. But in the 1969, you got Feeney and Fred Hampton. So we spoke about how the 1980s is when the underworld gets exalted, but it belongs in the underworld because what you have happen is now you have millennials being born, and this becomes their ceiling, but it belongs down here. So when they say that the dating world is in hell, they're pretty much right. But we got to take it back to the beginning. So I'm gonna symbolize this as Christianity, right? This is Christianity. People think things that are antithetical to Christianity is Islam, right? Judaism, right? But in actuality, these are sectors of spirituality. Spiritual, right? So what's antithetical to spirit is actually science. I'm not going to say it's antithetical, but it's the opposing force, or it's the opposite of spirit. So when you say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was a God, science will tell you no, Big Bang. Or if you say Adam and Eve, science would say theory of evolution, right? So let's go back to the beginning. We got to go start with Genesis. The first 7 books of the Bible is what you call the Torah, right?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
That's what Jesus taught out of. That's where Moses comes. I tell you, I'm going to run through this because I got to get up to finish your call. I'm going to try to get through all of this in 5 minutes. Let's go. He's switching up the location. All right, so Egypt, that's where you get Moses from. But prior to Moses, you have Genesis. I'm going to pause this to say I will be making pop culture references because I know we're stuck on entertainment. We're addicted to pop culture. So I will refer you to Bob Marley's Exodus album. Now, in Genesis is when you have Jacob and Esau. Esau lost promise to Jacob. Jacob wrestles with God, and God renames him Israel. Israel is not a place, but it's a person. Israel had 13 sons, one of them being Joseph. Joseph becomes not a pharaoh, but like close to the pharaoh. Just read the book. He saves his brothers from a famine. They end up multiplying. You got Benjamin, Levi, all of the sons. They become multiple. Now you have Moses. Now you have Exodus. They end up over here. They wander in the wilderness for 40 years because they couldn't stop complaining. And God was like, you know what? Don't even worry about it. I'm going to send my son. Look at Deuteronomy. They said, okay, we're going to send y'all in ships. Y'all going to be slaves. Boom. Now you have Benjamin landing in Jamaica. Now you have Levi in Haiti, the spiritual ones. A whole bunch of people. Boom. Now you get Judah. Judah lands in Virginia. 1619. 1619, there was only 13 colonies. There was no such thing as the United States of America. 13 colonies. They were bound by the British. So the British didn't take them into slavery. God did. So now they are living on the land that was promised to them, but under servitude. In Virginia in 1619, United States doesn't happen until... So you don't have the United States till 1776. 1776. Remember, God put y'all into slavery, right? 1776, then you don't have the first president until 1780s. I don't know when exactly, but 1780s, George Washington, right? They are beneath you because this is God's law, right? Beneath you. But unfortunately for slaves, since the British is no longer in charge, you guys are sovereign, but you guys don't know that, or the slaves don't know that because they're slaves. But so they no longer had ownership. So you have slavery still happening. Meanwhile, this has nothing to do with this. They're like Freemasons. They're just here. But because slaves couldn't read, that the perception of them exalted these people. So now they're above, but their perception, the thoughts of the slave to trump what was going on here. Eventually, the slaves started revolting. And then Lincoln said, okay, if you fight for the Union against the Confederate, you guys are free, right? You guys can have freedom. But unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln didn't do that because of ethics, because of morals, because he felt bad for slaves. It's because the Industrial Revolution made slave labor obsolete. Right, so this was already developed. This was underdeveloped. So if you have slave labor developing their own land, that means you could cultivate the rest of America. But unfortunately, this is called the Homestead Act. This is where you get your 40 acres in the mule from. If you cultivate the land, you can keep it. Guess what was happening? The Europeans went through a dusty revolution. They was all losing jobs. I would implore y'all to watch Les Miserables. It talks about the French Revolution. Anne Hathaway won her first Oscar for it. They needed jobs. They found out that America was giving away free land that was meant for the freedmen, the newly freedmen.
That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves. It was so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country.
FYI, this is not about race. This is about economics. They're moving the retirement age to 75 because there's too many people on Social Security. It's like, oh, snap. The new world has land. Let's all go. They came in droves into New York called Ellis Island. If y'all remember that famous scene in Titanic, they were on their way here to grab land that was meant for the newly freedmen using the Homestead Act. Everybody should check out Sarah's Oil on Amazon Prime. After all the race riots, the Ku Klux Klan, the terrorism.
People don't know that the Democrats is the party of the KKK.
Yeah.
People don't know that the Republicans are the party that freed the slaves.
The general laid out include the Ku Klux Klan, the United Klans of America, Unite to Right, National Alliance, the National Socialist Movement, the Aryan Nation.
Then you have the Great Migration to where black people ended up back in the outskirts. Them into something called the ghettos, to where they stripped them of resources, but they ended up thriving. So now you have integration. Dr. King woke up.
Through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
All right, shortly after that, he passed away. Now let's get into Afeni and let's get into Fred Hampton. All right, 1969, she's sentenced to life prison for conspiracy to burn down buildings and bomb buildings. Now you have a dark-skinned, frail, skinny woman thrown into jail, high school dropout. Now, in order for her to liberate herself, she reads law books in her prison cell. She's facing a life sentence, her and her 20 co-defendants. Now, she goes up against a bunch of CIA agents and get them to tell the truth on the stand. What Afeni represents is going directly against the literacy crisis going on right now in America. She was a high school dropout. She was a self-taught lawyer and got everybody free. All right, 2 months after her acquittal, she gave birth to her son, Tupac. Now, I have to jump forward, a little forward, and then jump all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. I know. I got to get into the science to get into Fred Hampton. But let's go forward. Tupac was a fan of Niccolo Machiavelli. His philosophy was fear over love. Like, it is better to be feared than it is to be loved. Also know the laws of the land, which is exactly what Afeni did in order to get free. Now, when King Charles came to the United States the other day, he went into Harlem and watched the black kids cultivate the land. This is what you call keeping you in a loop, a cycle. Now, Tupac is from Harlem. Afeni Shakur is from the Bronx. Y'all not about to pull a wool over our eyes. We see it. Now, while he was at the White House, he was talking about the Magna Carta, which is the blueprint for the Declaration of Independence. Nobody is above the law. Not a president, not a king, nobody. Now, this is what we call philosophy. Philosophy gives birth to theories. Now, we have to talk about the theory of evolution. All right, this is not about skin color. This just is what it is. Most of humanity does not want to believe they came from a black woman. They would rather believe we came from monkeys. Now, the issue with the theory of evolution, there is a missing link. There's something missing. So what is the missing link between ape and human? Well, science wants us to believe that it is actually black people. How? Well, we will finally be getting out of history and we're going into the now and into the future, utilizing science, utilizing Sigmund Freud's id, ego, superego, the primitive mind, the mind control, how they use music to keep you in lust in order to be in your primitive mind, how Fred Hampton stressed the need for discipline in order to be in your superego. He changed it from black versus white to oppressor and oppressor.